Hey, good morning, guys. Ken at Tortoise Capital. This is the Foundation's Q&A check-in for September 10th, 2023. Uh, Greg, what's going on? Anything
Things
on
are
your
good.
mind?
No, just rolling along and still learning, still enjoying the process. So, thank you.
Okay. Brian, what's going on?
Oh, look, just sort of working through where I want to be and where I want to end up, which is probably, I thought I would have had that sorted by now, but yeah, just working through that really.
Well, more people ought to spend more time on that deceptively simple question.
Well, I thought I did know that before I even started the course, but as I'm learning and
Yeah.
as I'm gaining experience with it, now I'm starting to struggle with where I want to be. So but thanks for that.
Well, I think if we look at this as a learning journey, then every answer to that question is a tentative one based on the integration of the most recent information with everything else that we've already accumulated and thought about and made tentative plans for. So we're always in a series of approximations anyway. There should always be that little the cooking pot should always be
On.
bubbling along there. You know, this is not it's not a destination so much as it is a mindset for a journey. Is how I would phrase it. Lou, how are you doing today?
Well, based on that, my journey is kind of just starting out. So, I mean, I'm doing okay. I need to work on my patience, um, letting things develop. But that's my issue.
Yeah. We may get a chance to visit the four Chinese sages today in regards to that, especially Mencius, Mo Tzu. Um, I think we'll get to that one because that has something to do about the learning journey. So we'll talk a little bit about that.
Great.
Mullen, what's up?
I'm doing good. I'm doing good. So I have I have been trading along. I haven't posted it yet because I was doing a lot of internal thinking on actually what I'm doing.
Yeah.
And I'll give you the high level summary of it and also the plan what I'm trying to do next. So I did about like a 32 trade on the exact same time frame, exact same instrument, and I had a near break even result. And the way I'm reading it is I'm getting something, but something is not clicking. And I need to figure out what it is. So I'm going to take a step back and go back to just one pattern, CD.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm going to do now next 30 only CD and see what happens, and I'll come back and report.
That
And
makes sense. Yeah, there's sort of a initial broad survey for familiarity that we've got to engage in because there's a lot of territory to scout,
right,
and you got to find out quickly what it feels like to be in there just to satisfy our own curiosity. But then, as you start thinking about production, you got to think of all the places that I've been and all the things that I've seen. Which one feels the most correct for scaling into productivity? So that's sort of the next step, which sounds like where you're at.
mhm.
Yeah. Um, yeah. We'll just start where we are. So this has a lot to do with Brian's question on the learning journey and Lou's comment about patience. So Edward Slingerland he has the life that I used to dream about when I was on an army road march, thinking, man, what would I rather be doing than carrying a 50-pound rucksack at 3 o'clock in the morning on a 12-mile road march as part of a 2-week field exercise where I'm going to average 4 hours of sleep and walk 20 miles a day, just to do it again. And the life that I always imagined was the life of the mind, studying the Chinese classics and thinking about what the wise men said with respect to life. So as you try to stay awake on a road march, and you can fall asleep walking when you do enough of it, just to keep my mind busy, I would imagine that kind of life. And these are some of the things I would think about. So, Edward Slingerland's fantastic book, Trying Not to Try, is well worth your attention. He does a nice YouTube presentation on it too, in a couple different places. He talks about his favorite game, which looks like air hockey, and it's person A against B. What they have to do is move a little disc down to the other end. So B will win if he can move the disc to the end of the table where A is. And A is trying to move the disc to B. And the way that you move the disc is by relaxing your mind and generating delta and theta waves, which are the brain waves associated with deep sleep and relaxation. And there's a headband around your head, which is monitoring your delta and theta waves. And when you generate those, it will add force and it'll move it. If you lose that relaxation, then the other guy's going to start winning. So his experience was when he closed his eyes, he was doing really well, and then when he opened his eyes and he saw that he had almost won, he could no longer maintain the state of relaxation because of the desire to win. And then A won because when he lost his ability to relax, A, who had been relaxing with his eyes closed, ends up winning. So that little paradox of trying not to try is the centerpiece of his discussion of effortless action, or wu wei. That the part of your brain that tries is also the part of your brain that you're trying to direct not to try. So you're actually using effort to calm down the part of your brain that focuses on effort, not to do the thing that it's doing. And this is a conundrum in Chinese philosophy, and there were 4 sages that we can talk about. The one we all know usually is Confucius, who spent 70 years working on forms and rituals, mastering what the right thing to do would be according to tradition. And at the end of 70 years, he could leave all of that deep scholarship behind. He had almost like a Rolodex of traditions and forms, and he intuitively knew what it was he was supposed to do in any social, formal situation, and it would just come naturally to him without thinking. And so this was a case where the rigorous attention to all those details and endless scholarship freed him in the moment to be able to respond spontaneously but properly. And it looked like he was engaged in effortless action. And so the Confucius way of entering this zone where you can perform effortless action came from a very studious, scholarly, formal, rational learning model. On the other side of the circle, the venerable Lao Tzu, he's known for the uncarved block, and he said what man really is in his original primitive state before he got all civilized, before he started using his brain to start thinking about himself and the world and separating himself from the world in order to study himself as opposed to looking at your natural instinct as part of the landscape. So Lao Tzu was really, his advice was get back to the original state of and just live in accordance with your inner nature, which is correct, your natural state without thinking. And so it was a return, his idea was like a return to the uncarved block of wood, which has all the potential in the world inside of it waiting to be released, but which is connected directly to the natural living growing processes, the tree, and the sun and the rain and the wind all conspire to create the tree, and when the time is right, wood is available in the form of blocks that can do anything you need, and all the potential is contained inside the wood. So in Lao Tzu's form of thinking, all you had to do was stop thinking and just remember who you are and where you come from, and then forget those memories and just be the uncarved block in a natural state. And thereby, everything you did would be a natural response, and you couldn't be more effortless than not trying at all, except to just be who you are. So Lao Tzu is very much just be who you are. Well, both of those fellows inspired generations and centuries and eons of followers. Two noteworthy ones. Mencius, the wise gardener, is a disciple of Confucius, and Mencius is like Confucius with a maybe a more practical, local take on things. And what he says is, yeah, I guess it's important to study all the forms and rituals, but don't forget that you're living a life today filled with people and things to do and a living to make and all that. And he says, just try to approach things as a wise gardener might. And what Mencius does is finds a nice balance point between Confucius and Lao Tzu. He says, look, I appreciate all of the studies and forms and rituals of Master Kung Fu, but I also appreciate the natural state of wood from Master Lao. He says, when you're a gardener, and you plant a little tree or a little plant in there, and it starts growing, you get that first little shoot. So the gardener understands that you can't make that thing grow faster by pulling on it and stretching it. You have to let that thing grow according to its nature. Now, there's things that you can do around it to give it its best living, growing environment by weeding and watering and having good soil and letting the sunshine, get it out of the shade, keep the varmints away. And so there's some things that you can do to help it grow faster by setting conditions, but really it can only grow according to its own nature. So he really incorporates a lot of the lessons learned about how to improve the environment with proper action, but also staying connected to all of the natural processes of the wood block. And so Mencius would say, look, if we are that wooden block, uncarved, yet our self-improvement is like little shoots and tendrils that are alive and growing and coming out of that wooden block. And so we should look for those things, and if we actually seek to improve, or we have some plan about how we want to improve for the good of the people, then we should treat those opportunities to grow in the directions we move in the same way a wise gardener might. So Mencius and gardening to me seem like a powerful set of insights for the cultivation of patience. And Lou, if you just start thinking about those things, what does a gardener do? What can a gardener do to become more patient so that he's not in an urge to go pull on the baby plant? That would be the thing I would reflect on. Well,
Thanks.
they're coming out of, so if Mencius comes out of the Confucian tradition, Chuang Tzu comes out of the Taoist tradition, and he also, I think, strikes a balance, or can be found in between the two original sages, Lao Tzu and Confucius. And what Chuang Tzu says is, look, I appreciate old Master Lao and the uncarved block and just be yourself, but he says, if you just kind of look around, that little uncarved block that you are is in a setting. And you have these competing ideas or values or principles about, in general, the way you perceive your own nature, and you want to get to an improved state. He says what you need to think about doing is treating all of your intentions and actions as an expression of your sacred spirit, which is connected to that larger world around you of Lao Tzu. And you want to be in alignment with all those natural forces so that you are in your proper place and doing the things that you feel called to do. And accepting that and surrendering to those moments and treating them sacredly and being aligned with the universe around you as you understand it, but also being aligned internally inside this domain which is yours, that you want that internal alignment in the same way that we talk about the idea of your vision and identity and values let you set goals and outcomes and intentions and give you the direction in which your decision to act can be directed, and that your strategy is your sort of your general plan on how to get there, and the tactics are the things that you do at each and every little checkpoint and on every path you decide to take. And so if you can properly behave in the moment with your tactics and have a strategy that is in general trying to get you towards your objective and goals, and then your operations is sort of how you plan that out to go in stages and phases, and where you are connecting those tactical moments. Well, Chuang Tzu would say that is an internal alignment between who you are at the values and identity level with your intentions, and in the actions you take and the way you organize those and build on your momentum and keep ratcheting up your learning and having your strategy in a way designed to allow you to get more resources and take into account how the world is changing around you so that you can, never not working, always be moving, even when you are at rest. And so Chuang Tzu would say is if you are aligned and you are connected, you've connected your spirit to your actions to the world around you in a sacred way, in everything that you do, you are the living sacred spirit, then you'll be fine. And he talks about the famous butcher who never needed to sharpen his knife because he understood at a deep level the ox or the steer and knew where the bones were and the tendons and how to separate the meat from the bones in such a way that he would never unsharpen the knife through action. He was so perfectly aligned and treated all his mundane work in the sacred way that he never needed to sharpen his knife. Whereas a new butcher, learning to be a butcher, might have to replace his knife every week because it would get dull because he would not understand his business and would hit a hard object. And a journeyman butcher might have to change his blades every year, and a master butcher might have to change every 10 years. The transcendent butcher of Chuang-Tzu never had to change his blades or sharpen his blades because he was so perfectly aligned. So this state of Wu Wei, this zone of effortless action, you can get there from a lot of different angles. And sometimes one of them is the way you got there. It may not always be the way that you get there. And so Slingerland's book says, look, there's these 4 domains, any one of which can get you there. But here you are, you're on your pathway, and now you're wondering, all right, if I'm not in that zone of Wu Wei, how do I get there, and how do I get to the next step effortlessly? And there's no simple answer on that, but he does acknowledge that the end state or the guidance of each of the masters would be that's where you want to be, and there are ways to get there, and your way is the way you choose, and you can get there, and the fact that they got there in different ways can be helpful. So, in my view, the spiraling nature of going through all of those different dimensions, because I can think in my life where there have been times when I've applied the Confucian model to make sense of the world and to achieve things, and things got better after I studied them for a long time. But there have also been times when I just said, hey, let me just trust my child mind and just completely go with the flow and surrender, and that's been successful. And other times when I've tried to just be a patient gardener, to study nature and to study the ways of gardeners and try to choose one that was right-sized for me and just accept my own path. And then there have been times when I've sort of taken the top-down alignment with spirit and then derive what needs to be done as long as my values and my effort to be properly placed within my setting, and then do the things that felt ritually or spiritually correct. So and as I go through my life, all 4 of those things have appeared at various times, and it really does feel like a spiral. And that's the essence of the open-ended, thing that Slingerland leaves us with, is that it does come to how do I try not to try in order to just make it feel effortless. And so patience and persistence. And I'm reminded of Chris Christopherson's line in the movie Convoy. His nickname on the CB radio was the Rubber Duck. And his passenger said, well, why is that true? He says, because my daddy told me, son, be like a duck. Stay smooth on the surface, and then paddle like the devil underneath. And you know, almost everything else about the movie Convoy is forgettable, except the amazing title song and the by Jerry Reed, and a beautiful Jerry Reed guitar solo. But that has always stuck with me. That I'm trying to think if I ever heard better life advice than that. You know, stay smooth on the surface, but paddle like the devil underneath. And that's almost look at the dichotomy of that. You know, smooth, calm, and serene to outward appearances, and some sustainable engine that drives you according to the fires of life that burn within you to give you the energy to do what must be done. So that's the things that I wanted to say about patience. I would also remember the bit on hard work. These are Welsh coal miners coming up from a 12-hour shift underground. Craftsmen, proud of their work, dangerous work, not the healthiest of work, but honest work. And so every time I think I've got it hard or things are tough, I try to remember what these guys would think about how hard I think I have it. And tell me, good son, tell me about your hard work. Tell me how hard you're working for the family. Those are the people I come from. What I would say is, you know, that hard work and all that. There's a lot of that ooh way stuff on this chart. I would think, you know, there's a alignment in here. There's sort of an awareness of where you are and where you want to go to. Can we be aligned in there? Can we consult the library and the rituals and find the things that have sort of worked so that at our starting point we can be as well advanced as we can? And can we learn to use the wisdom and guidance of others to help us improve our angle of improvement? Can we follow the rules of evidence and reasoning to ensure that what we learning are actually the things that we should be learning? And can I periodically just add a wedge to keep that learning locked in so that I don't backslide? And can my tactical actions be connected with all the other things that I'm doing all the time so that I can generate some actual momentum, that I'm not working against myself? And can I keep finding ways to lock in my learning as I go? And can I go from uninformed beliefs to evidence-based beliefs that are tentative, and continuing to ratchet my learning up as we go? That's sort of that long-term persistent learning that incorporates the knowledge of the head, rational thinking, the knowledge of the heart, the knowledge of the gut, and the knowledge of my hands on how to do things, and the knowledge of my feet on how to be persistent as I go from event to event, story circle to story circle, keeping all of that stuff aligned and finding ways to get all five of those. Um, and when I'm in those story circles, and there's that word sacred that comes from Chuang Tzu, the idea of the story circle, which is specifically a safe place, first and foremost, in which we can trust the people that are in there so that the truth may emerge, so that we can then do something with the truths as revealed, as experienced, which could lead to working on our project when we leave the story circle for a work in progress, or maybe it's working to improve a tool that we can use in the workshop. And the 7 principles of what I have learned is they can either start or end with truth, or start or end with a reflection, but you end up going through all 7 of those stages when you do true storytelling correctly. That you start with the truth in all things, and that you make space for everyone's truth to be told, and you listen to all of them. And then you work on changing the plots of those stories if you want to get different results. So there's things you can do to morph the plot for the next time you iterate. And that if you work on timing of actions and when you engage with your team and in the environment, that timing can help improve the success rate, and that we can do things to help stories along, our stories, other people's stories. So look for opportunities to do that. And then the way we set conditions is like a director working on how to stage the play. That is, the story is going to unfold on a stage. So what can we do with the stage to help with the telling of the story? And then we can conclude that round with a reflection. And so when you go through all of those, you've completed one arc in the true story circle. But there are other times when you start with the reflection. You know, you just, hey, I just noticed I was thinking about that thing that happened before. I'm just thinking back to that. I'm starting with the reflection, and maybe it leads me to think, well, what if I changed one thing in the stage or shifted the stage around? What might that do to change that story that had been told? And what kind of help might I need to enlist to help move things around in the stage? Was there something about the timing that I might alter? And is there something in the plot that might be adjusted? And when I think about the 4 different places that I can make some changes, maybe all I need to do is create a new space in which I can let those things unfold. And maybe I just create a new sacred story space to begin to explore those, and then start with the truth. And so now what I've done is I've gone through all of those 7 stages of true storytelling in the inverse order, and that seems to be a perfectly acceptable way to do that. And maybe I start with a small truth that I notice. Hey, you know, I was thinking about that great big story that and there was some little nugget, some little seed of truth, the tiniest little mustard seed, perfect unto itself and all the potential in the world. And maybe I just need to make some space for it and give it some room to grow and surround it with nourishment, and then don't try to stretch it, but let it grow in its own time, and do some things to help that story along by weeding and watering and sunlight and keeping the varmints away. And maybe I can approach that according to the seasons of growing, and I can develop some patience and wisdom along the way. So the bottoms up, almost like Mencius, that's Mencius, the wise gardener, going from the tiniest seeds of truth all the way up to the grandest reflections looking outward over many lives. Or maybe I could start with sacred truths that are profound and top level, and I can try to derive from them some things like let me create some space to think about all the ways in which this top level truth might unfold and the different tentative pathways that that truth might take as it explores the world around it. And maybe I could learn to think about when's a good time to depart and um, what's the time of day or season or year or century that are influencing the way it unfolds, and how can I look for and find help along the way, and how is it going to appear, and be open to the possibility of help arriving just when it's needed if I'm willing to surrender and accept it. And then how can I craft all of the little events as I go along the way, and stage each one of those to be successful in a small way, but contribute to the larger journey, which brings me back to my eternal truth as it unfolded in all of the events along the way. And so what started as a grand truth became expressed in many ways under many circumstances and brought me back to an affirmation of the validity of that larger truth, but with an extra degree of belief because I've been around the mountain in a spiral way. I kind of until I got down here to the ground truth, and then I reclimbed the mountain and get back to the truth. And so that's a Chuang Tzu style of sort of aligning the sacred spirit and manifested through true storytelling. And as I think about my identity, I this is just my internal trader. The importance of sort of that in top level permanent truths about plan, prepare, execute, assess. Am I ready to take the shot? That's very tactical and action oriented. And then there's things that we know. Only those four things are necessary to hit the target. And then things to think about in living that spiritual life of alignment. So I can find all four of the masters in that particular actor in his place and in his space. And I can think about my desire to create that maximum sustainable rate of learning. What's the steepest I can make that sustainable learning curve? And I can think about the body of knowledge, almost the Confucian knowledge, the technical pieces of the art, science, and craft of trading, as the specific things I'm trying to learn about the profession. But I can also use the insights from true storytelling that I've just described as a way to create environmental conditions for me and my accountability team. Safety, trust, truth, and opportunity as a way, and storytelling as a way to create the artifacts that help me document the lessons learned that leads to maximum sustainable rate of learning, and the storytelling science of the Fletcher treatment for creativity that we use in Creativity 202, the single most important one of which is perspective shifting, which is looking at the elephant from all of these points of view, and you learn to shift your perspective and to see it in an approximate way from all these locations to give you better insight into his nature. The nature of trading is the uncarved block that we're trying to assimilate. And I can either do that with accountability groups who I've learned to trust for their perspective because they're experts and masters in their own point of view. And actually, when you engage with other people like that in a true story way, you end up acquiring some of those perspectives that stay with you when you leave that circle. So there's real learning that goes on when you are listening at a deep level in a true story circle. So when I bring together those three bodies of knowledge and I emphasize the principles of doing routine things routinely and creating standard work, that's where the craft knowledge comes in. So I can do those meetings and perform those rituals in the standard way, and I can get better at how I do these support functions and in how I approach the body of knowledge. And I can remember that the point of all this is to live well and not just to get to pass a certain test at some moment so I can say at that moment I passed the test, but no, rather to be a continuous waveform that I hope is improving as I go, and that it's a continuous path of learning. That's where some of that patience comes from. You know, in our walking man diagram, you know, that patience is coming from the feet that have to keep taking that step every day, pick them up and put them down. That no matter how well you know it with your head and how well aligned you are with your heart, and no matter how much you have accommodated and incorporated your legitimate fears to protect yourself against risk in a dangerous world, but also have learned to use the energy of fear in a positive way to assist you with your preparations and proper execution, and to strike hard when it's time to do that. And to keep doing that every day, that no matter what your past successes are or your past failures, each next day is a new day at work that has to be embraced and done with patience. So, patience is the thing that you carry along with you. That's the thing we actually have to learn to get into that zero state. To remember, we've got to get there. And I will remember that the things that conspire to harm us are inertia, that bodies at rest tend to stay at rest, and that our culture rewards people who are dumb and thoughtless and unquestioning, and that it leads you down that path of least resistance and easy accommodation and doing things the easy way, and that the status quo is designed to make you happy, and you're happy enough with the status quo even though you say I don't like the status quo. You're happy enough with it because otherwise you'd change. So if you're not changing, it's because at a deep level you really are satisfied with the way things are. So if you think you're not, what is it at a deep level which is communicating to you that, hey, no change is needed here at a deep level because we're comfortable and satisfied? And in your external world of head, you just got to learn to live with that, because we're not going to change no matter how, because your feelings of discomfort are going to go away, and you're going to learn to medicate that away or to divert your attention away from the fact that you, in your head, don't feel satisfied. But until the guy at your core, your gut and your heart, where real change occurs, until you have realigned your identity and values and say the where I am is not good enough and I'm going to move from here. Until that happens, everything else is just kind of BSing around. You know, so the status quo makes you happy. It gives you just enough to keep you from making the foundational changes. So fat, dumb, and happy are the three things that conspire to keep us where we are. And the things that will make us transform and change in the way we want to is to have a purpose, a destination, a goal, objective, an end state that we are aiming for and striving for. That it's many, many, many steps along the way, and it's going to be a long and winding road. And to be persistent in that pursuit, you need to be guided by a sense of purpose that's connected to your values to continue to find the energy and fire of life that burns inside you that gives you the energy it takes to get there. So you must have purpose. If you don't have a purpose, you're just unvectored energy. And then you have to have action to go from here to there. Requires work. The expenditure of force to move matter through time and space a certain distance. If you have all the purpose in the world and all the right tools, but you don't take action, then you're going to be right where you stay. So you must take right action, and that action can be formed effectively, more or less, or efficiently, but there has to be you got to take the step. And then you need artifacts, which are the embodiment of wisdom and learning. These are the little ratchets, the tools that we can use to create the leverage so that we don't backslide, so that we can multiply the energy of the actions that we're taking to move mountains in small steps, but nevertheless moving. So if you have all three of those, purpose, action, and artifacts, you can actually make transformational change in the world. That's why I am strict on writing things down, drawing pictures, telling stories about the pictures you drew that explain the words that you wrote, which summarizes the event, the action, the elephant, that thing that happened, that whole story that you told and experienced is in words and pictures embedded in a story that lives and shared with others. So those three things will contribute to making the change. And wherever you end, all of those three positive forces compete against those three that are holding us down, fat, dumb, and happy. And that's why you are exactly where you are, because of those forces for change and the forces for maintaining the current state. And that's why you are here at any given time. So certainly keep doing those things, but how about we, instead of making this a dogfight, let's enlist those three things onto our side of the equation. We remember that bodies at rest tend to stay at rest, but also bodies in motion tend to stay in motion. So that's why it's important to act now, and to keep on going. Keep going. Once that thing is moving, the flywheel effect will keep you going. So let's build on that tactical momentum. And then when we're aligned and always pulling towards that same purpose, all of those little actions in the moment start adding up. Nudge. So let's enlist inertia on our side and bring it over here. And let's change our culture from being dumb to being smart and helpful in our accountability group. New traders, old traders, experienced traders, novice traders, everybody that's in there. Accepted just as they are, and add to the power of the tribe to all get well together and get better together. And we can use the power of that learning culture to enlist the forces of culture on our side. And let's document our status quo and use the power of continuous improvement and realize that our status quo is not a noun, it's not a current destination, but it's really a work in progress of continuous improvement, and that our status quo is always getting better because we're doing routine things routinely with standard work and incorporating the best insights. So our status quo is one of constant improvement. And in that way, I can enlist those, instead of fighting myself, I can use the positive sides. I can reframe and reorient and bring all of these things over onto this side of the ledger. And then when you take those three things and add it to those three things, you have everything, all the ingredients you need for irresistible momentum and continuous change, and you can achieve maximum sustainable rate of learning. But you got to document it. You got to periodically update it and synthesize it into the pearls of wisdom that sustain you. Those artifacts are shared with yourself and with others. You have a to-do list from all your assessments, from every trade, from every after-action review, from every meeting, from every lesson, from everything that you read. All of those things from your constant assessment go into your to-do list, and you use your values and your brain to prioritize that 1 to n, and always working on the most important things that lead to the greatest possible payoff in a way that makes sense. And then we remember Musashi's advice, do not engage in useless activities. And so that we're always working on the most important things, and those things are aligned with our purpose and intent. And that's sort of how we get that done. And then if we apply that towards the learning ecosystem, you know, we know that there's always something else I should be working on. You know, whether it is just staying connected to plan, prepare, execute, and assess so that I'm always ready. And you know, I can assemble the right members of my team virtually and individually. That I can have processes that I can rely on to produce standard work that lead to continuous improvement. That I'm never going to take on more risk than is appropriate for based on evidence, so I can scale correctly because I've gone through all the steps. I can remember that there is a science of trading, an art of trading, but also a craft of trading. My to-do list is always properly prioritized, and that I limit the work in progress to the few essential things that I can focus on and get to closure. And I keep track of the things that I've been doing as a way to remember that I'm actually making progress. And it may not feel like it, but when I look at it over time, I can see the actual evidence. Excellence leaves marks, and you can see it. But that's why you got to create the artifacts that document where you were. I can be aligned with who I am and what I'm aiming for, with the way that I behave in every moment, and then arrange things with resourcing and timing and phasing and coordination to connect my grand vision with the way that I'm doing everyday mundane things. That I can incorporate as I learn along the way different ways of knowing, that I can pay attention to systems, self, and market and the alignment between those things, that I can understand the principles, pieces, parts of the body of knowledge, that I can learn those principles through action, that I can leverage the resources of the community, that I can continue to act like a scout to invent new things. I can see where I might need to go, I can investigate, I can selectively research, test, accept things, and improve my beliefs based on evidence, do more of the things that work, do less of the things that don't work, make sure that I'm getting my rest. And you are writing your own trading book when you do all these things and document them. And what you're documenting is what happens after you've planned and prepared and then took that into the market and executed properly with the four elements: time, will, pattern, and money. That you were detecting signals, deciding on how to trade it or not, frame it, and then deliver the results, and you're assessing it. That you're remembering that my individual targets are part of a sector or part of a market, and that I put all of that into my standard frame, and that when I'm ready to make that trade, I have a steady position, I see my pattern, I'm in the zero state, and I execute at a level of risk that allows me to be steady on that. And that I'm using all of the architecture and geometry of proper trade execution to do that well. And that my assessment is routine, ritual, that's daily, weekly, monthly, annually. And that I'm investigating all four phases, that I'm looking at how to improve, what to continue to do, how, things I should be working on to improve, and then the specific actions I'm going to take. And I document those things so I can see the trends in my own learning. And I can learn how to improve my micro habits. And that I can use the chat room and my accountability partner and my personal learning journal and the periodic coaching calls to stay strong in the assessment phase. And then I'm going to use my case studies and my trade log and my damn histogram as the reliable evidence about what I'm doing. Nothing else matters except those things, because those are the things that I'm doing. Well, if that's my learning ecosystem, I got to get all the way through all of these and improve in all of those areas. So if I set it if 0, I don't know anything, 7, I've internalized it intuitively like Lao Tzu, and I'm just forgetting everything else and letting my inner nature shine. Well, where am I on each one of those things? And I can scan that as my little self skill assessment, decide, hey, that's, right now I'm here, 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 and here, and so I'm going to work some on this one and then move it up. Or maybe I want to get much better at the thing that's really paying off. But that's a deliberate choice you make, but you got to get, you're probably as good as the worst one of those, you know? So when you look at all of these things that are on the chart and the ones you don't want to do, maybe you got to budget some time to do those things. So I would say that's part of the lifelong learning and journaling. So that's what I wanted to say about thoughts on personal learning environment for today. So, and it's also connected in a deep way to patience. And to me, the wise gardener. There are natural forces at work. Be aligned with them. Let them carry you along. Do your part of it, but it takes action. So that's what I wanted to say about all that. Let me take about a 5-minute break, get this thing working, and then we'll come back for the creativity stuff. Hey, good to see you, Hamad. And then creativity 202 check-ins are next. I don't see any of the boys, and Jeff was not going to be able to be here, so that may be a short one. So take good care, and I'll see you back here shortly. If we'll see who shows up for creativity. Cheers.